All right, so this is podcast number 12, and for this one, I'm going to be talking about specifically just about college football and uh, CFP rankings that just came out today. And so I'm just going to read them off real quickly, just the top 10, so you can get a general idea. If you haven't already seen them, I highly encourage you to just look them up so you can have reference. But number 1 is Georgia, 2 is Alabama, 3 is Notre Dame, 4 is Clemson, 5 is Oklahoma, 6 is Ohio State, 7 is Penn State, 8 is TCU, 9 is Wisconsin, 10 is Miami. Now, the one thing that's surprising right away for most people is that Alabama is not number 1, it's Georgia. But in reality, that doesn't really matter because it's so early on in the year and in the playoff system that, there's plenty of time for those rankings to switch because there's still the whole regular season, and then there's just conference championships. So there's quite a bit of time to go before that actually becomes solidified. Uh, so keep in mind, there are teams that won't be in this top 10 that will be in the top 10 at the very end. And there are teams that are in the top 10 now that won't be at the very end of the year. However, of these 10, if I had to pick, if I just being honest, I think the top 7 are the only ones really with a shot to make it in these 4. That would be Georgia, Bama, Notre Dame, Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Penn State. Now Georgia is currently number 1. Bama's number 2. Those are probably the 2 best teams in the country right now. I don't think a ton of people will argue with that. Notre Dame is on a roll, but at the same point, it's Bama. Bama and Georgia. And anytime you get enough respect to be considered better than Bama, especially in a ranking like this, you are legit. And Alabama is just, both teams, Georgia and Alabama, are stock loaded with NFL talent. They're just on another level right now. But the only thing is, when it comes time for the whole SEC championship to come down, Georgia and Alabama, it's going to come down to essentially one of these teams is going to have to go home with a loss, probably. Uh, oh, definitely. So one of these teams is going to have a loss at the end of the year. I don't necessarily think they'll knock them out of the top 4, though. I think because right now, if they keep playing in the dominant fashion they've been playing, whoever loses that game is still probably going to be number 4. They're probably going to be number 4, and the other person is probably going to be number 1. Uh, that being said, the rest of the Power 5 conferences have to worry because that would mean 2 SEC members in the playoffs, and that leaves just 2 slots left. So they're going to be conference champions who are not going to be, in the playoffs. And that's going to make it pretty hard, to draw a line who goes where. That should be also worrisome for number 3 currently, Notre Dame, because they don't have a set conference, which means they don't really have conference championship to compete for. Which means they won't face a higher ranking opponent in the final week of the season, and that can make a hell of a difference. It's a huge deal in determining these conference championships. They matter, they really do count. And teams get a lot of credit for having these championships. And with Notre Dame not having one, that could certainly easily be the reason they get booted out of the top 4 and out of the playoffs. But they are deserving their rank right now. Clemson surprises me. I go to Clemson right now, so I'm a Clemson fan. But 4 is just, I think it's too high. I know they were compared to Alabama as being the 2 top programs in the nation at one point earlier this year. I didn't believe that either. They were nowhere near squat as good as Bama. Because they were winning games, but they were barely winning games. They weren't blowing teams out like Alabama was. They weren't doing that. They're not as deep as Alabama. They're not as good as defense as Alabama. They don't have the solidified offensive line that Alabama does, or the run game. It's just, they don't have a Calvin Ridley. They have a Deion Kane, but that's not Calvin Ridley. They don't. So Clemson, all that comparison to Alabama, that's just throw it out the window. That's not correct. But 4 certainly seems high especially because they lost to Syracuse. Now, granted, in their defense, and I do think this is something you need to take into consideration. Kelly Bryant was injured going into the game against Syracuse. Couldn't run the ball, so was one-dimensional. Was playing decently, got injured, got knocked out of the game, and the backup quarterbacks came in and couldn't do anything. The backup quarterbacks were terrible. So you have to consider that we didn't have Kelly Bryant that game. So even though we did lose to unranked Syracuse, just a really uh, unfortunate situation for us, especially for the offense. And you have to also think about last year, like uh, you know, lost to Pitt, who was unranked. We lost to Pitt, and we still made the playoffs, and we ended up winning. So there's going to be that little kind of subconscious that's going to kind of be playing in these people's thoughts as they're trying to make this poll, as they're trying to come up with this ranking. Uh, they're going to be thinking, oh, they won last year with one loss to an unranked team. So that might help out Clemson a little bit in the end. Number 5, Oklahoma is there with one loss. They are basically in here because of Baker Mayfield. He really is a Heisman candidate to be. He certainly is a force in college football. One of the most accurate guys. Great passer rating, accurate. Precise. Not many interceptions. He's just overall one of the most mature kind of. When I say mature, I mean like just professional style quarterbacks. In that he high completion percentage, low interception rate. Productive offense. That's what I mean when I say that. Number 6 is Ohio State, who just knocked off Penn State last week. Penn State was ranked number 2 in the nation, and from the AP poll, and now they have fallen to 7. Ohio State's at 6. So Ohio State and Penn State both have one loss. It hurts Penn State the most though, because they're lost to Ohio State. When it comes down to who's going to be the Big Ten champion, that plays a huge role in it. Uh, Ohio State has the edge right now, so it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Each team is led by a Heisman candidate. Penn State's got Saquon Barkley, and Ohio State's got T.J. Barrett. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the future. But only one of these teams essentially is going to make it to the playoffs. It's not like the SEC where you can get Bama and Georgia in. It's going to be either Ohio State or Penn State in the end, if either. So just think of that going down the line. It's going to be one of these two teams, and it's not just T.J. Barrett and Saquon Barkley in these teams. There's loads of talent on the other side. Think about Trace McSorley on Penn State, and they have a great linebacker who doesn't get mentioned nearly enough. And then, of course, Ohio State has their always dominant defense, like on an ever-present D to contend with. So it's always just going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Of course, the TCU, they just lost to Iowa State, who were ranked number 25 in the nation. Coming to this week, TCU was ranked number 4 when they lost. Losing to Iowa State, I believe, will probably throw them. I don't think they'll rebound. Wisconsin's undefeated. Wisconsin's not played any ranked teams yet. So, even if they stay undefeated throughout the year, they're not gonna. I don't think that. Well, they might have in the Big Ten championship. They might have to play a ranked team. In which case, that would certainly boost their case, to be in the top 4. But if they only have one win over a ranked team this entire year, it's going to be hard to make the argument to put them ahead of teams like Clemson and Notre Dame and Bama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Penn State, teams that have been playing ranked teams for a little while now. Then, of course, the 10 is Miami. Miami's good. I just don't think they're great enough to push themselves up to the front. In order for Miami to get up there, they would need teams above them to lose and lose like crazy. I mean, they would need Notre Dame and Clemson to lose. Clemson losing twice would knock them out. They need Oklahoma to lose. They would need Ohio State and Penn State to lose. So they just need basically every team from 4 or 3 back to lose basically to get in. So I just don't see that happening. But looking at it now, I think the way he'll finish out the top 4, and I'm trying not to be biased even though I go to Clemson, but it's probably me to take this with a hint of salt. I think it's going to come down to Georgia, Bama, Clemson, and so that last spot for me is the one that I just can't figure out who we're going to not in that order necessarily. Clemson might be 4, or Georgia might be 3 and Bama 1, or Bama 1, Georgia 2. I don't know. It could be flip-flop like that, but those are the 3 I have. And for me, the last break is between Well, like I said, the other teams that are available are Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Penn State. But for me, it'd be between Notre Dame and Ohio State, depending on how TJ Barrett plays for the rest of the year. If Barrett suddenly keeps playing great and keeps himself in Heisman contention, then yes, I think he'll be Ohio State. If Barrett falls behind, kind of declines, uh, then I think Oklahoma will be the team to compete with Notre Dame the most because Baker Mayfield is, like I said, one of the Heisman front runners. So they're just not. Oklahoma's good, but I don't think their program's not overall uh, as I don't think develop's the right word, but as talent stocked as Ohio State's is. Uh, so if I had to pick, I guess the final four, that would maybe the top four right now would be my final four. Uh, the chances of it staying the way they are is very slim, and if you've paid attention to college playoffs in the past, there's constant changes, and the committee has no consistency from year to year. So who knows? This Clemson loss to Syracuse might knock them out in the end. You never know what's going to happen. Because ultimately it's people deciding who gets in. And, when people are making the decisions, you never know what's going to happen. So it'll certainly be interesting. It'll certainly be a topic to talk about in the future. Uh, it's going to be something that becomes really prominent until we actually reach the playoffs. And then every team that doesn't make it in is going to be whining and complaining about why they didn't make it in until next year. So it's just this fun little guessing game. I guess everyone gets to play from now until the playoffs actually start. But yeah, that's all I guess for now, guys. See you next one.